Align Business Advisory Services is a disruptive M&A consultancy serving middle market companies. While the company is based in Winter Park, Florida, Align has achieved consistent 250% year-over-year growth as a leading advisory to entrepreneurs and mid-sized companies seeking to raise capital or an exit. Acquisitions International named Align Business Advisory Services the best mid-market M&A consultancy of 2019 and 2020, and the firm's team spans every major market region of the U.S. and comprises seasoned CPAs, MBAs, corporate executives, and financial professionals. Industries served include healthcare, consumer products, food and beverage, manufacturing, industrial services, and business services. And their network of acquirers and investors includes Goldman Sachs, Google, KKR, Bain Capital, Bank of America, Microsoft, Salesforce, and more. Align's founder, Dena Jalbert, was just named an emerging leader by M&A Advisor magazine and was also named one of the top 50 women in mid-market M&A by Mergers and Acquisitions magazine. So welcome. That is quite a resume there. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So tell me a little bit about how you got started and a little bit more in depth about what Align is doing.
Sure. You know, I started my career as a CPA only because Warren Buffett told me accounting was the language of business. So I figured if I could speak the language, there'd be something in it for me. But I was lucky enough to be able to find myself working alongside private equity investors who were making investments, growing businesses, and then subsequently exiting them. And over the years, I just saw that there was a plethora of entities they were sitting across the table from that didn't have the right advisory group. They were leaving money behind, not taking the right transactions, and that never sat well with me. I knew there was an opportunity to do that better. So that's really where we came in. So we serve lower and mid-market companies across the industries you just mentioned who are looking for their first liquidity event and trying to figure out what that next chapter looks like.
And you've done $2 billion worth of transactions, I guess?
We have.
Explain that.
Yeah, so it's a lot of transactions, especially when you're thinking, the lower and mid-market. But there's so much capital chasing these assets. It really was born out of the 2008, 2009, financial crisis. Those were the only deals that were happening. It was an illiquid recession. There was no capital. There was no debt available. But these deals are smaller. They don't require as much financing. They certainly don't require a syndicate of lenders. So they were still going on. And what investors saw was like, hey, instead of buying $1 billion entity, why don't I go buy 20 to 25 smaller ones, consolidate, bring those economies of scale together, and then exit it for $1 billion in the future. And so because of that activity, there's just so much money chasing good assets. So we've been really busy and trying to help those folks find that and spend the next $2 billion.
And that's a nice hedge too. That way you're not exposed to just one company, you've got a little bit in 20 companies.
That's exactly right. And also these are industries and businesses that people need to consume. So you think about COVID when they kind of coined them the essential business. These are manufacturers, industrial service providers, heating and air conditioning. I'm in Florida, and if your air conditioning goes out in August, you're going to scrape up $180 to patch it and fix it. And so in healthcare, these are sectors that have free cash flow going all the time, regardless kind of what's going on in the macroeconomic backdrop. And so by virtue of that, if you consolidate 25 of those, you have a really substantial scale in terms of ongoing free cash flow, which is obviously valuable to the investment community.
Very interesting. How do you see the M&A market in 2024, particularly in these middle market companies that you deal with?
Great question. It's going to be a really robust year. So 2020 and 2021 were anomalies. There's helicopter money. There was, so much stimulus. So those were kind of anomaly years. But 23 and 24 have actually outpaced pre-pandemic M&A volume for low and mid-market M&A. And that's because, as I mentioned before, there's quite a bit of dry powder, a lot of capital chasing those assets. Similarly, you're seeing public corporations and even your larger privately held organizations look for growth to kind of recap losses from 20 to 22. And so everybody's looking for M&A opportunities. You combine that with an aging baby boomer population. 70% of small and mid-sized companies are actually owned by that generation. And so time marches on, and they're now looking at retirement and what that next chapter looks like. That's also the generation that was the first to put their kids through higher education. So the kind of handing the business over is is a bit of a lost art these days because they've all gone on to pursue their passions and are engineers and doctors and teachers or what have you. And so you've got this combination of an extensive amount of capital, a lot of businesses looking for some sort of transition and succession, merging together all at one time. And so 2024 is going to be another robust year. I think also with interest rates stabilizing, hopefully, that debt will be a little bit more free-flowing, which will just add fuel to the fire. So busy year.
Can you quickly explain, like, when you talk about small or a mid-market company, is that measured in terms of revenue, or like what would that include?
Great question. Yes, it's traditionally how we define it. They are companies that have revenue anywhere from 20 million a year to 500 million a year, and that's a pretty broad spread. But the characteristic that they all traditionally have is that they are founder or family owned. These are usually companies that are looking at their first liquidity event, external liquidity event. They've bootstrapped and grown over the years, strong free cash flow, but now are hitting that precipice. The company needs to go on and grow either with or without them, and what does that look like? Yeah.
What kind of questions should executives ask if they're looking at some kind of capital raise or an exit or going through the process?
Because these are traditionally founder-owned businesses, there tends to be a bit of a lack of strategy. It's more reactive because there's all that money chasing good assets. They're receiving phone calls and letters and solicitations, asking them, hey, if you want to sell your business, we'd like to help you. And so some business owners, we're all entrepreneurs, and I like to say a hustler from time to time, so you always want to listen to those conversations. However, you're reacting to the market. So the biggest piece of advice, and I would say the way that we help clients the most, is really designing a strategy. Where can the business go and grow? What do you want as an individual or a family, your life to look like? Do you want to stay on for a while? Are you ready to retire or relinquish the reins? Or is there some hybrid of that? Do you have key management in place, and what do they want? And they're just as much as a part of this as an owner is. And so that strategy is pretty all encompassing. And then you also have to look at the market and timing. If the market is strong and there's activity in your space, you're going to want to be proactive and do it then versus waiting till some undefined point in time. Right. So strategy is probably the number one thing I think our clients could focus on.
That makes sense. What are the challenges for these businesses that you see over and over again?
Traditionally, because they are smaller, I always like to say they're not small business, but they're also not public enterprises. So they wedge in the middle, and they all have varying levels of financial and operational sophistication. What I mean by that are strong financial controls, operational policies and procedures, things that you would obviously see in much larger organizations. But because they're smaller, a lot of entrepreneurs can still touch everything, so they feel as if they're in control of that. However, the external market is looking for those things because they're a signal of risk mitigation. So one of the things we coach a lot of our clients on is get your books clean, have them audited, have them consistent, have a CFO, have a great team of leaders, have operational structure in place and redundancy, and it just makes you all the more marketable, and will help you go through a transaction much more seamlessly as well. Because that's one thing to have someone want to buy your business. The other is to actually see the money wired into the account at the end of the day too. So yeah. And what excites you about Align for 2024?
Growth.
So we have, as you mentioned in the introduction, we've grown almost 250% year over year, and we're planning to outpace that for 2024 as well. We're adding to our team. We're based in Florida because it's warm there, but we have team members all across the country and serve really any market in the nation. So we want to create more density, and the reason for that is there are just so many businesses that need to take advantage of the opportunities present to them today. So we want to make sure we're the ones that are there to be able to help them with that. There's so much capital that has to find a home, so we want to be the ones to do that. So I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, and you're really connecting them.
Yes.
The capital and the business.
That's right. I like to say we're matchmakers, glorified matchmakers, but it's really about finding the right partner because capital is abundant. It doesn't necessarily mean that partner's the right one. And so it is an art, especially with founder and family-owned businesses. There are a lot of nuances, and again, they're not as sophisticated as others, and so you have to really be intentional about how those puzzle pieces come together, because then you'll hear the horror stories of when they fall apart or when things don't go as planned because you weren't strategic or intentional. So, yeah.
Well, Dena, thank you so much. It's
My
so
pleasure.
interesting to hear about the company and the industry.
Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.